A small good luck charm, sold for about $1, drove an entire nation into a frenzy. People believed it could make them rich. They fought for it. They went bankrupt for it. One woman was crushed to death in the stampede to buy one. At the peak of the madness, a single one of these charms could sell for over $30,000. And then, almost overnight, they became worthless again. This is the story of one of the strangest financial bubbles in history. Not tulips, not gold. A tiny religious medallion that an entire country came to believe could make them rich, that built a market worth billions, and that left thousands of people holding nothing at all. The charm was called the Jatukam Ramathep. It came from Thailand, from a southern province called Nakhon Si Thammarat. And to understand how a small amulet drove a nation mad, you first have to understand what amulets mean there. In Thailand, sacred amulets are everywhere. Small medallions, usually bearing the image of the Buddha or a revered monk, worn around the neck for protection and good fortune. A taxi driver hangs them from his mirror. A businessman wears one under his shirt. They are a normal, everyday part of life. Most cost very little. The Jatukam was, at first, just one of these. It was created in 1987, a circular medallion about the size of a large coin, made to raise money to build a new city pillar. It was named after a pair of guardian deities, and it sold for around 40 baht, a little over $1. For nearly 20 years, almost nobody outside the region paid it much attention. Then, in 2006, the man who created it died. His name was Kun Fantharak Rajadej. He was a famous police officer, a legendary figure said to have lived past 100 years old, and rumored to be a master of sacred and magical arts. When he died, his funeral drew enormous crowds. And because he was so closely tied to the Jatukam amulet, people began to seek it out. They wanted a piece of the magic he was said to possess. The timing could not have been stranger. His death came just 2 weeks before a military coup overthrew the government. Thailand was anxious, politically unstable, and uncertain about its future. And in uncertain times, people reach for something to hold on to. They reached for the Jatukam. What began as devotion quickly became something else. A rumor spread, then hardened into belief. The Jatukam did not just protect you, it made you rich. And once people believed that, the frenzy began. Demand exploded across the entire country. Temples everywhere rushed to produce their own editions. They gave them names designed to promise exactly what people wanted to hear. Super rich. Immediately rich. Rich without reason. Miracle rich. Each new batch was blessed by monks, advertised with glossy brochures, and sold the moment it appeared. People did not buy one. They bought many. They wore them stacked around their necks, the way a rap star wears gold chains. The more you wore, the luckier you were supposed to be. Businessmen, taxi drivers, politicians, street vendors, everyone wanted them. And as demand soared, so did the prices. The basic amulets that once cost $1 were now selling for hundreds. The rare editions, the limited ones, the ones blessed in the most auspicious ceremonies, sold for staggering sums. A single rare Jatukam could fetch 1 million baht, over $30,000. There were claims of amulets selling for 10 times that. A piece of molded clay and powder, worth $1 to make, was now worth more than a house. The town where it all began, Nakhon Si Thammarat, was transformed. More than 10,000 people poured into the province every day. Every hotel room was booked solid. Vast amounts of money flooded in each week, all of it chasing the charm. Sculptors who designed new versions could make small fortunes. Printers, vendors, ritual organizers, dealers, an entire industry sprang up overnight around a good luck charm. By 2007, the numbers had become almost unbelievable. According to Thailand's own fiscal policy office, the Jatukam amulet trade was worth around 22 billion baht that year. It made up an estimated fraction of the entire country's economy, a measurable share of the national GDP, generated by a religious medallion. The government's revenue department even began to wonder whether it could tax the boom. But underneath the gold and the blessings, this was a bubble. And like every bubble, it ran on one thing: the belief that someone else would always pay more. The frenzy turned dangerous. With so much money at stake, the amulets became targets. Thieves broke into shops, homes, and even temples to steal them, and the crowds themselves became deadly. When a fresh batch of coveted amulets went on sale, thousands would rush to buy them. In one such crush, outside a school where amulets were being distributed, a woman was trampled to death, and dozens of others were injured. More than 10,000 people had camped overnight for the chance to buy a charm. People were now dying for a piece of clay that was supposed to bring them good fortune. And the deeper the madness went, the stranger it became. To stand out in a flooded market, producers competed to make their amulets more potent, more sacred, more extreme. Some sought out unusual materials to mix into the clay. One proposed using the ashes of the dead. The whole thing was sliding from devotion into something grotesque. A race to the bottom, dressed up as a race to heaven. The most respected voices in Thai Buddhism grew alarmed. Senior monks warned that this was no longer religion at all. It was greed wearing the mask of faith. Thailand's supreme patriarch, the head of the country's Buddhist clergy, announced that his temple would stop supplying the sacred materials used to make the amulets. The spiritual authorities were trying to pull the brakes on a runaway train. But bubbles do not end because wise men warn against them. They end when belief runs out. And in late 2007, it did. Quietly at first, then all at once, people began to ask the obvious questions. How could so many amulets, hundreds of different models, hundreds of editions, millions of charms, all truly be sacred? How many had actually been blessed? And how many were simply churned out to cash in? The market had been flooded with so many that scarcity, the very thing driving the prices, had vanished. And the promise at the heart of it all had quietly failed. People who had bought the charms were not, in fact, getting rich. Confidence cracked. And once it cracked, it collapsed. The prices fell as fast as they had risen. The rare amulets that had sold for a fortune became nearly unsellable. The dealers who had stockpiled them, betting the boom would never end, were left holding worthless inventory. The ordinary buyers who had spent their savings, sometimes their life savings, on a charm that was supposed to make them rich, were left with a small piece of molded clay and powder, worth almost nothing. The bubble had burst, and the 22 billion baht industry deflated almost as quickly as it had appeared. The Jatukam never vanished completely. The amulets are still made, still sold, still worn, but as ordinary charms now, at ordinary prices. The madness long gone. The frenzy that gripped a nation lasted barely 2 years. And what it left behind is the same lesson, written by every bubble before it, from the tulips of Holland to the markets of today. People did not pay a fortune for the charm because of what it was. $1's worth of clay does not change. They paid because everyone around them was paying, and because they believed someone else always would. The value was never in the object, it was in the belief. And belief, unlike gold, can vanish in an instant and leave a fortune vanishing with it.